In this video, we're going to talk quickly about introduction paragraphs and conclusion paragraphs. But let's just talk about introduction first. So an introduction paragraph looks conceptually like an inverse triangle, and it goes from something that is general to specific. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to grab the reader's interest through the hook. You are literally hooking them in. And you want to do that through a couple of different ways. And I've provided those ways or some examples in a document that looks like this, which is also linked in your outline. One of those ways is to create a gripping anecdote or a story. It needs to be short and it should be no more than 4 sentences. But this is kind of where your creative writing comes into play. So, for instance, an example would be, crouched over his quill pen and thin parchment paper, he writes into the night, far after his servants have slept, far after the animals in their pens have nestled down, and far after the sun setting in the west. The candlelight is Thomas Jefferson's only company, and the only thing keeping away the dark as he pens the words an entire nation will be founded on. Now, if that's what you wrote, I'd be automatically hooked because it reads like a novel. You're using imagery, sight, sound, touch, taste in order to paint an image. So automatically there, I have bought in. Another way to hook the reader's interest is to describe an event or person in detail before using a quote. So this has 2 parts, right? You're using imagery and creative writing before you end up using a quote. This is like a really, really good lead in. So, say in your essay, you're going to quote Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. And again, these are examples, not ones that you should actually use for your essay. These are just examples to kind of get your thoughts kind of flowing on this. So, instead of just saying, I have a dream, I am going to use imagery. So, follow along. Decades led up to the moment when Martin Luther King Jr. would stand in front of a sea of color, not just the color of clothing worn in the 1960s, but a multitude of skin colors, all looking up at him in awe. For here he spoke not of what the United States was, but all it could be. On the morning of August 28th, 1963, he said over a crackling microphone, I have a dream. Now, again, you're being super descriptive here, which makes me hooked. And then you have an amazing contextual lead in right before your quote. And automatically there, I'm in, I'm sold, I'm willing to read your essay. And then finally, you can make a profound statement. So this profound statement technique and tactic is to take the reader off guard and automatically pique their interest. And you do it by saying something that's controversial, that goes against long held belief systems. And obviously, it needs to relate to your overall point of the essay. So you don't want to just say something controversial that has absolutely nothing to do with what you're talking about. So you want to start with that statement, and then you need to take a little bit of time to explain what you mean. So the example is, the American dream is dead, period. It always has been, period. That is a profound statement, right? So you could say that, and then you would explain what you mean by that and how it connects to your overall point. So going back, that's what your hook is. Those are 3 different ways you can do that. Once you get to your hook, you have to then talk about a narrowing transition. So how does this beautiful concept or quote that you've now brought into the reader's view connect to the topic in your essay? And then the final thing in your introduction paragraph is the thesis statement. This is the last thing that should appear because this is the roadmap. It tells me what you're arguing and exactly the order in which you're arguing it. So I'm going to read an example from a prompt from last year that is a really good example of an introduction paragraph. And notice the colors. The hook is in purple, the narrowing transition is in this kind of teal blue, and the thesis statement is in yellow. So, screams echoed through the pitch black night in a cacophony of pain, fear, and destruction. Revolutionaries promised the dawn of a new era, of freedom from tyranny, illegitimate taxes, and the yoke of the British. But dawn seemed too far off for the men freezing and bleeding in the battlefields. Dawn seemed too far off for the mothers and children at home praying they'd not be forsaken by the grim, that they would be forsaken by the grim reaper. So that was my hook. Now here's my narrowing transition. Notice how it takes these descriptions and it connects it to the prompt. Often the world looks at the Revolutionary War as an inspiring and nostalgic event of evil versus good, when in reality it was a time of chaos and fear for all living in the colonies. War is never a good thing, though at times it may be necessary. Okay, so I'm narrowing transition. So I'm saying this is what people think. However, we're going to start talking about war here. And now here's my thesis. It is not the war we should be celebrating and worshiping, but the documents the war produced and the ideals established because of it, the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. So the argument is, what should we venerate in history? Is it the war, or is it the ideals that came from the war? And the argument is it's the ideals. And then I know that my first paragraph is going to be on the Declaration of Independence, and the second is my Bill of Rights. So your thesis, your introduction needs to do that. Grab the reader's attention, narrow in, and then hit them with your argument and make it clear and make it captivating.